Okay, so on the bench here today we have a brand new piece of junk. Unfortunately. I actually got this radio on my bench a day before Mark got the one that he just did a video on, but he wanted to put his out first, so I told him, that's fine, I don't care. Whenever I get this posted, I get it posted. But I wanted to do, my review video on it as a tech and the problems I foresee with this radio. So what we have here is the Cobra 29 LX Max. This has some new features in it. I mean, honestly, feature-wise, it has nice features. Functionality's nice and whatnot. The problems I have is having to work on radios, its internal problems. From the outside, from a user's standpoint, it's probably a nice radio. Now, granted, the microphone cord weighs probably half as much as this radio, because, holy crap, I don't know how much lead they put in that thing, but Jesus. I can just imagine in the dead of winter how stiff this cord is. I mean, it's stiff right now at room temperature, and I can only imagine this thing's going to be like a coil of spring steel, if you get into a 20-30 degree vehicle. So, this has all kinds of new features. It has a recorder, which I think is kind of neat, because I'll miss, doing something or turn around and miss the last transmission. This has a last transmission record playback feature. Of course, it has the normal cell phone Bluetooth integration. Cobra's had that for several years, the Bluetooth, so they've continued that, and you can see it still has the little tiny hole there, because there's actually two microphone elements. There's your normal CB mic, and then that little tiny hole there is an electret microphone cartridge for the when you're talking on your cell phone. So you can do hands-free, so the microphone's just dangling in front of you. If you're a truck driver, you'd have that hanging in front of you. The audio, that the person you're talking to on the phone that you're receiving from them comes through your radio speaker, and then when you talk, it actually goes in this microphone cartridge, gets through the Bluetooth system, then sent to your phone, and the person on the other end of the phone. This has this is not a radar detector. Let me make that really clear. It is not a radar detector, because if it was a radar detector, in some states, that would make this radio completely illegal to even own in the state, because some states radar detectors are illegal. If you get pulled over and even have a radar detector in your trunk, brand new in a sealed box, you're still busted. Virginia's one of those states. So what this has is what they're calling I think it was Irad. It's a cloud-based service. So I guess if you have a Cobra, other people have the Irad radar detectors, it sends anytime that one of those radar detectors, or if you alert, actually there's a button on here to report, a speed trap, that sends it to the cloud via your cell phone, because remember, the radio is paired to your cell phone, and your cell phone is attached to the web. So it sends it to the Irad cloud service, and then for other people, if they come into the area where there is a radar trap, as long as you have that app up on your phone, it will alert you that you're coming into a radar, a speed trap. Even though you don't have a radar detector, it will tell you that one was just sensed there, however long ago, whatever. But so that's kind of a neat feature. It's basically, an upgraded 29 LX. I'm not even going to plug this in, turn it on. Mark went over a lot of the features. I just want to cover the inside. So what I don't like about it. Took me 2 seconds to get the covers off to go, yep, I don't like it. Now from here back, it's a Cobra 29. Now it's the same basic board design that's been around since the 1970s. The Cobra 29 has been around, the Cobra 29 model has been around since the 23 channel days. But the radio still retains the same basic layout and schematic as the original 1970s 40-channel version of the Cobra 29. The big downfall is that Cobra and Uniden broke up years ago, and Uniden no longer makes Cobra's boards. So Cobra took over. I guess they got in contract negotiations. That's a whole topic for another story. But ever since, it's something like 2011 or somewhere around there, Cobra radios just flat out suck now. I've seen radios where resistors just burn up. The parts that never ever had problems before just poof, go up in smoke. And it's because the bean counters got involved. You can see that they downsized resistors. Some of these things, they're just way too small for the job they're asked to do nowadays. It is what it is. Luckily, like I say, it is still a Cobra 29 in the back, so, it's workable. You can work with that. What really sucks from a tech's point of view is from here forward. Now, for starters, this has kind of a night watch, so it has the glowing, here, but they have finally done away with that, unlike the old Cobra night watches, which absolutely sucked. Don't get me wrong, they were great. Glare off of this rig. God, this thing shines. Turn this thing around, see if that's better. There we go. It's a brand new radio. I didn't want to put tape all over it because I don't want to cover anything up while I'm showing it. As soon as I get done that, before I do the alignment on this, I'll tape up the bezel. But anyhow, this is not a inverter for your high voltage for an electroluminescent display. What they actually did on these is, in behind here, there's actually little circuit boards that hang down in between that have surface mount LEDs on it. And there's a setting in here for that back panel illumination. There's actually two illumination settings, the display settings, and then there's the illumination for the panel markings here. And there's low, medium, and high. And this is the PWM, or pulse width modulation, LED driver module for that. That's what this little box is. So it's no longer that noisy, buzzing module that used to be for the electroluminescent displays. This is just an LED driver, and if you notice, there's no ribbon cable going to it. The only wires that go to it are actually wires. There's no flat flex cable going up to an electroluminescent display. That's a good thing, because I hated those things, because those, if you had one of those radios in your house, it might last forever, but I'm sorry, in mobile applications, the electroluminescent displays in those modules, they just don't seem to hold up for very many years, and they'd crap out. The PLL is now different. Now, Mark has covered this. They've added some pins to this. Now, the chip still says Cobra 29 LTD on it. And from just some, first peeks at it with a scope probe sniffing around, the extra pins really don't seem to do anything. It's basically, it looks like they just came out with a new footprint. They've added some pins to it. The IC is now longer, but the functions still seem the same. So, that needs to be investigated a little bit more. But there's no channel selector switch. They're using a rotary encoder, same as the other LX version. So, there's a ribbon cable here that goes up, and it's a microprocessor that actually sends data, or the programming information, down to the PLL chip. So instead of wafer switch contacts, basically sending ones or zeros, grounds, or voltage to the program pins, it's just a microprocessor doing it. So it's still just a simple old PLL chip, VCO circuit. There's nothing fancy going on here. That's still remained the same, so that makes it easy for techs to work on. The crap starts at the front end now. The first thing I noticed, and I've already fixed, I'd call it a temporary fix. It will lengthen the life, at least for this customer who bought this radio. And I absolutely despise these things. Edge board connections. So this radio has two circuit boards at the front. It has this processor module board, and then there's the front display that goes up and down. Now you can see all of these little edge connections soldered. They're going to break. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You put this thing in a vehicle, especially for truck drivers, that is going to fail. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't care what they do, that's going to break. That is a weak point. Anytime I've ever seen edge connectors in mobile CB radios, they always fail. The problem with that is, now I've completely desoldered every single one of those. I went in and sucked the lead-free solder out, because that tends to be very brittle. And I've resoldered all of these with about 10 times more solder than the factory used. but I use a lead, tin, and silver solder, which has a higher tensile strength. So that alone will give us a better chance of those things lasting longer. And the second thing I did, like I say, I use about 10 times as much. You can see how thick the fillets are on that. They're almost at a 45-degree angle. I really, really loaded those things up with solder, but you can see there's still, still plenty of space in between there. So, and then of course cleaned it up after I was done soldering. I've, cleaned all the flux off of the board, but that should last a lot longer than it was from the factory. But it's still going to be a weak point. Now for this customer, it might be fine. He doesn't drive a tractor trailer or a dump truck, but for truck drivers, yeah, that's, no matter how much soldering you do, that's eventually going to fail. I just absolutely despise those. They should do something else, either plated through holes and notch out here. They need to stiffen that connection up. Relying on solder alone, because you have to realize what they have there is, you have two circuit boards. You have the board, this front display board that stands up and down, okay? It has a solder pad, let's say about here. It doesn't go the whole way up to the top, but it's, let's say, right about here on the board. And you have this circuit board, and it has a solder pad that runs the whole way out to the edge of the board. The two boards are butted together, and you just fill it in the middle with solder. And now, like I say, I've added a lot more solder, so it basically comes down at a 45-degree angle. There's a lot more in that fillet area in there. The problem is the only thing holding those two boards together is the solder. There's nothing mechanical. There's, so just vibration or flexing of the board, going like that over time, it can flex every time you hit a bump. Eventually that's going to fail. So, if you're a tech, you're working on these radios, I would suggest before you even let one of these radios out the door, remove all the existing solder, resolder that with a good high tensile strength silver bearing solder, and hopefully you won't see this thing for 10 years or more before it starts to have problems, because the factory soldering job on this radio was absolute crap. Some of those fillets in there was barely enough to make contact between that front board and this board. If I had pushed on this thing hard a couple times, I probably could have cracked them here at the bench. So, yeah. And speaking of soldering, the radio that Mark had, I actually had to send him pictures of this one. He took the covers off of his. There was a damn wire in it that wasn't even attached in the radio. This brown wire right here, underneath this black one. This one, it was just hanging out in the radio. It was stripped on the end, and there was the hole, but it wasn't soldered in. So yeah, quality control, yeah, they don't have any. Now for me, working on surface mount components is no problem. I work on surface mount components, so everything from here back is through holes, so that stayed pretty much the same. But everything from here forward, it's all surface mount. So if you don't like surface mount, don't even attempt to work on these. The parts are tiny. Unless you have a microscope, the proper soldering equipment, you're going to destroy the circuit boards or the components even trying to work on it. You can just barely see down in there some of the stuff. Not to blind the camera. You can see there's... The big problem here is, and it's one of the reasons I really don't like this radio, it is not tech friendly. The one processor in here, it's a chip-on board. Okay, so if you look down in there, you see that black spot? Yeah, well that black spot that's under there, I don't know if I can even get it to where you can see down in there. It's so hidden by the wiring. There, you can see it a little bit better. I'm trying not to blind the damn camera here with a flashlight. But that black spot, what is underneath of it is a microprocessor. But it's actually on the board. It's called chip-on board. And then they cover it up with that blob of epoxy. The problem with... Now that's great, but if it ever goes bad, your radio just became a paperweight, because there's no way to service that. It's completely unserviceable. You either need to get a new board, that whole processor board, and replace it, or just throw the radio away and buy a new one. And honestly, if I had to guess, the amount of money they're probably going to want for that board, and then the labor and the time it's going to take to replace that thing, it would probably just be cheaper to buy a new radio. Like I say, that's not that great. It seems that they're controlling the noise blanker A&L with a relay. I don't really know. There's actually two relays down on this board. I don't like relays because they're mechanical. They can fail. They have contacts that can get pitted. They can oxidize. They're mechanical in nature. You have a coil in there. There's just so many things that can fail in a relay. Now, don't get me wrong. Relays can be dependable. But, yeah, I'm kind of iffy about, if it's on an echo board or something that's easy to remove and get to and service, that's one thing. They didn't make these easy to get to. I do believe they are, yes, they are through holes. So if you ever had to replace, there is, yeah, okay, yeah, they're both through. I was just trying to make sure that there are actually pins sticking through for both of those relays. So yeah, it's just going to still be tricky to get down in there to get to them. But yeah, and you can see there's actually another couple surface mount. Damn, that light's just way too bright. A couple more surface mount ICs down in there. And you can see that one right there, really, really fine pitch pins. So yeah, like I say, if you don't know how to do surface mount soldering, don't even attempt that. You're going to screw up the IC, screw up the board, the traces on it. You're going to screw something up. Yeah, they're like I said, I don't mind working on surface mount. The problem with this one is getting to that. You've got all this blasted wire in the way. So, whoo, yeah, even once you cut the wire ties off, it's still going to be tricky getting down in there to work on. It's not very modular. It's not like you can pull a board up and out. I mean, a lot of times, like ham radios, they can be tricky to work on. But once you get the overlaying board off, it's usually not too bad. This one, yeah, there's these, what looks like plugs down here. That's not a plug. That's just a connector on the end of the wires with pins that go through the circuit board and they're soldered on. So it's not like you can unplug all of these connectors that go down. They're soldered down to the circuit board. Now you can desolder them. You could come in, all these header sockets here, you could desolder them and pull them out. But yeah, that's just a lot of extra work. So, yeah, they did retain the Cobra 29 from here back. Granted, it's not a Uniden made. It's a giant electronics piece of junk. So, what are you going to do? But, there's, like I say, they're still using basically the same design as they have. There's some minor, even more minor changes on this one because of some of the features this radio has. But it's still basically the same. So, if you worked on Cobra 29s before, from here back, it's still the same. Anything from here forward, yeah, that's uncharted territory. Now, it appears what Mark was looking at, he was doing some sniffing on the data lines here, because it is actually nice. All of these edge connectors here, I don't know if that'll even show up in the camera, but you can see they're actually very nicely labeled. The camera's not going to focus on that, is it? Nah, it's not. But they actually silk screened it and labeled all of those connections. He was doing some sniffing there, and there's some interesting ones there. And they apparently are they've come up with their own code. I guess language. It is huge data packets that are being sent between this board and the front board. It's not, a normal 6 or 8 bit or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's like huge. He had it hooked up to a logic analyzer, and it's holy crap. So it looks, but, as far as modifications go, like he was saying, that can be a good thing. Is the front display, if it's kind of a dumb display, everything's being done back here. So anything that changes on the display is being done on this board. So in the future, if he tinkers with it, he might be able to either come up with an interface board where you intercept everything that's coming from this board to go up to the display. Now, there is a driver on the display, but intercept everything going from here to here, and you could allow the information you want to go through, but you could intercept stuff like channel and frequency display. And then you could use your intercept board, his channel modification board, to replace the 29. Now, of course, he's going to have to make... He noted that. He's like, I just put in an order for Cobra 29 LTD IC boards, adapter boards, for installing his channel boards. And, of course, they came out with a new package. So now he's going to have to make up new ones for this. It's almost like they've been watching what he's doing, and they thought, yeah, we'll throw a monkey wrench in his plans. But yeah, like I say, so yeah, he's going to have to play with that, but there might be some, because that's the problem. You can do a channel modification here, but the display is going to be completely useless. The channel numbers, because the frequency counter, I think a common misconception, the counter on this thing, it's not a counter. It's just what's programmed into the IC. It knows when you're on channel 1, the display should show 26.965. And it's fairly clear to see that it's not an actual frequency counter, because when you turn your clarifier, the frequency display doesn't change. It just puts 26.965 when you're on channel 1, 27.405 when you're on channel 40, and so on. But if it is a dumb display, as he's thinking, you could actually install a real frequency counter in here. Like I say, intercept the data that's going up to the LCD display, and then with your actual frequency counter module, you could actually send that data to that display, and it actually would reflect the actual frequency then. So, yeah, that's going to remain to be seen. But personally, I'm going to say these are overpriced pieces of junk. Probably nice radios from an operator's standpoint, but durability, yeah, Cobra 29s, I tell people. They just ask, yeah, man, I'm known for suggesting them. They're good, fairly cheap radios that last forever. Or I should say, they used to. The new ones, since they broke ties with Uniden, junk. Board quality, components. I mean, hell, I can even look at this one, the damn 455 filter. I don't know. I'll try and line that up. You can see how crooked that thing is. The 455 filter's in there, it's sitting in an angle like that. The one Mark had, hell, they had wires that weren't even soldered to the circuit board. I mean, yeah, quality control, quality of components, just pride in manufacturing. Yeah, none of those words pertain to this radio. That's about all I can say. So, it's got nice features. It'd probably be a fantastic radio as long as it works. But once it breaks, it's going to break. This is not your dad's Cobra 29. It's not a radio you're going to buy, throw in your pickup truck or your dump truck, and 20 years from now it's still going to be chugging right along with no problems. They're not that good anymore. But like I say, advantages, it's still basically the same back here, so easy to repair at the back end. The front end, a different story. So, yeah, there's just my first thoughts on this radio. Like I say, they've got good and bad. User interface seems nice, but lots of fancy things, and that's what people want, all kinds of fancy features, but they, and the prices they're charging for these things, woohoo! Man, you can pretty much almost buy a sideband radio for what they're asking for one of these things now. So yeah, but if it was me, I wouldn't buy one. I just don't ever see myself owning one of these. Probably the first one of these I own is going to be a brick. It's going to be one that breaks on somebody and they don't want to fix it, and I'll end up with it. Because yeah, I personally will probably never own one of these other than parts chassis. Just because of what I saw here. Like I say, it took me about 2 seconds popping the covers and I went, nope, junk. So, there's my thoughts on the new Cobra 29 LX Max.